Hi, I'm Cameron. I never thought I'd be the guy telling a story about family betrayal, but here we are. My dad passed away 3 months ago, and let me tell you, nothing prepares you for losing your best friend. He was a self-made man, built a successful construction company from nothing, and always told me and my brother Derek that we'd split everything 50-50 when he was gone. Cameron, you gotta come over right now, my wife Jessica said, walking into my home office with her phone in hand. That was Derek. He wants to meet at the lawyer's office in an hour for the will reading. Already? I looked up from my computer. Dad's only been gone 3 months. I thought these things took longer. Apparently not. Derek said everything's ready. She sat on the edge of my desk. You okay? You look worried. I don't know. Something feels off. Derek's been weird since the funeral. Weird how? He won't return my calls about the business. Dad left me in charge of operations, but Derek keeps showing up at the office, telling the foreman to check with him first. Jessica frowned. That doesn't sound right. Your dad specifically told you to run things. I know, but every time I try to talk to Derek about it, he says we'll discuss it after the will reading. I stood up and grabbed my jacket. Let's just get this over with. An hour later, we sat in Arthur Pemberton's office, Dad's lawyer for 20 years. Derek was already there, leaning back in his chair with this smile that made my stomach turn. Cameron, Jessica. Derek stood up, too cheerful. Glad you could make it. Of course we made it, I said, shaking Arthur's hand. Let's get started. Arthur cleared his throat and opened a folder. I'll get right to it. This is your father's last will and testament, updated 6 weeks before his death. 6 weeks, I interrupted. Dad was in hospice 6 weeks before he died. He could barely talk. Nevertheless, Arthur continued, this is a legally signed and witnessed document. According to this will, Derek Morrison receives 100% of the estate, including the house, the business, all financial assets, and personal property. The room started spinning. What? No, that's not. Dad told me we'd split everything. He promised me the business. Derek's smile widened. Looks like Dad changed his mind, little brother. Derek, what the hell did you do? I stood up, fists clenched. I didn't do anything. Dad made his choice. Maybe he finally realized who the responsible son was. Derek leaned forward. I mean, you were always traveling, always too busy to visit. I was there every day those last few months. Because you lived 2 miles away. I was across the state managing the business he asked me to run. Arthur held up his hand. Gentlemen, please. Cameron, I know this is shocking, but the will is clear. Jessica grabbed my arm. Cameron, sit down. Let's think about this. There's nothing to think about, Derek said, standing up. The will is legal. The house is mine. The business is mine. Everything's mine. He buttoned his jacket. Oh, and Cameron, you're fired. Clear out your office by Friday. He walked out, leaving me staring at Arthur in disbelief. This isn't right, I said quietly. My dad wouldn't do this. Arthur looked uncomfortable. I'm sorry, Cameron. My hands are tied unless you can prove the will is fraudulent. Then that's what I'll do, I said. Because something here stinks, and I'm going to find out what. I spent the next week in a fog. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Derek's smug face. Jessica kept telling me to let it go, but I couldn't. Cameron, honey, you need to eat something, she said, setting a plate in front of me. I'm not hungry. I keep thinking about those last 6 weeks. Dad was on so much pain medication. There's no way he was making clear decisions. Then prove it. Stop moping and do something. I looked up at her. You're right. Dad always said when something doesn't add up, check the math twice. My first call was to Miranda Chen, Dad's hospice nurse. We met at a coffee shop near the hospital. Cameron, I'm so sorry about your father, she said, sitting down across from me. He was one of my favorite patients. Miranda, I need to ask you about his last weeks. Was he lucid? Could he make decisions? She bit her lip. Honestly, not really. The morphine levels we had him on. He was barely conscious most days. So he couldn't have updated his will? I mean, he had some good days, but... She paused. Actually, I remember something odd. Your brother brought in a notary one afternoon. I thought it was strange because your dad was sleeping. Sleeping? Then how did he sign anything? Derek said he'd wake him up when I left the room. But I walked back in 20 minutes later to check vitals, and your dad was still asleep. The notary was packing up, and Derek was putting papers in his briefcase. My heart raced. Would you be willing to testify to that? If it helps get justice for your dad, absolutely. Next, I called the notary, a guy named Paul Henderson. He agreed to meet me at a restaurant. Look, man, I feel bad about this, Paul said immediately. Your brother paid me $500 to notarize that signature. Did you see my father sign it? Paul looked away. No. Derek said his dad had signed it earlier, that he just needed it notarized for legal purposes. I knew it was shady, but the money... You notarized a document you didn't witness being signed? I know, okay? I know it was wrong. If you're going after him, I'll testify. I don't want this on my conscience anymore. Armed with this information, I went to see Margaret Reeves, Dad's accountant for 15 years. She met me at her office after hours. Cameron, I've been hoping you'd come talk to me, she said, pulling out a file. Something's been bothering me about Derek's financial activities. What do you mean? 3 months before your father died, Derek opened a joint account with him, started transferring money, small amounts at first, then larger sums. In total, about $200,000 moved from your father's accounts to this joint account. Dad never mentioned opening a joint account with Derek. That's what worried me. I called your father to confirm, but Derek answered his phone, said your dad was sleeping and that he'd authorized everything. Margaret slid papers across her desk. Look at the dates of these transfers. They all happened on days when, according to the hospice logs I cross-referenced, your father was heavily sedated. Derek was stealing from Dad while he was dying, and then he used that money to pay off debts. Look, here's a payment to a casino. Here's one to a loan shark. Your brother was in deep financial trouble. I sat back, pieces falling into place. He manipulated Dad into changing the will so he could save himself. I can't prove the will part, but I can prove the unauthorized transfers. With the hospice nurse's testimony about his condition, we can contest the will. I stood up. Thank you, Margaret. Will you help me? Your father was a good man. Of course I'll help. That night, I met with Richard Torres, a litigation attorney. You've got a strong case, Richard said after reviewing my evidence. Undue influence, possible forgery, financial exploitation of an incapacitated person. We can definitely contest this will. How long will it take? Months, maybe a year. But with the evidence you've gathered, I'd say we have better than even odds. Let's do it. I want everything back, and I want Derek to face consequences. Richard nodded. We'll file first thing Monday morning. Once we do, all assets will be frozen pending the outcome. Good. Derek doesn't deserve a penny of what he stole. The deposition took place in a conference room downtown. Derek sat across from me, his lawyer whispering in his ear. He looked nervous. Good. Mr. Morrison, Richard began, can you tell us about your father's condition in his final weeks? He was sick, obviously, cancer, but he still knew what he wanted. Did he? Nurse Miranda Chen testified that he was heavily sedated, yet you had him sign a will revision during this time. Derek's jaw tightened. He had good days. I waited for a good day. Really? Because the notary, Paul Henderson, testified that he never saw your father sign anything. He said you paid him to notarize a signature he didn't witness. That's a lie. Is it? Richard slid papers across the table. These are bank records showing a $200,000 transfer from your father's accounts. Accounts you had no authorization to access, Derek's lawyer whispered frantically, but Derek pushed him away. My dad gave me that money. On days he was unconscious? Margaret Reeves has correlated every transfer with hospice sedation logs. Your father couldn't have authorized these transactions. This is ridiculous, Derek said, standing up. My dad wanted me to have everything. Cameron was never there. I took care of him. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. You manipulated a dying man for money, Derek. You forged his will. I didn't forge anything. He signed it. While unconscious, try again. Derek pointed at me. You have no idea what it was like. You were off playing businessman while I watched him die. You don't deserve anything. So you stole it? You manipulated our dying father because you were jealous? I wasn't jealous. I was desperate. I had debts, okay? I needed that money. His lawyer grabbed his arm. Derek, stop talking. No, I'm tired of Cameron acting like he's perfect. Dad was confused anyway. He didn't know what he was signing. So you admit it, Richard said calmly. You had him sign documents while he was confused and incapacitated. Derek realized his mistake. Wait, no. And you admit you took the money because you had gambling debts? This is entrapment. This is a deposition. You're under oath. Richard gathered his papers. I think we're done here. Derek lunged across the table at me. This is your fault. You're destroying this family. Security pulled him back, but the damage was done. He'd threatened me in front of witnesses, lawyers, and cameras. 2 weeks later in court, Derek tried a different approach. Cameron, please, he said, cornering me in the hallway. We're brothers. We can work this out. I'll give you half. We'll split it like Dad originally wanted. Now you want to split it? After you stole everything? I made mistakes, okay? I'm sorry. I was scared and desperate, but we don't have to destroy each other over this. Jessica stood next to me, squeezing my hand. You forged our father's will while he was dying, I said. You stole his money. You tried to erase me from his legacy. I know, but I'm apologizing. Doesn't that count for something? No, it doesn't. You're only sorry because you got caught. Cameron, please, I'm your brother. You stopped being my brother when you decided money was more important than family. I stepped closer. I don't want your apology. I want justice. His face hardened. You're going to regret this. Is that a threat? Before he could answer, his lawyer pulled him away. Derek, let's go. Now. The judge ruled in my favor. The will was declared invalid due to undue influence and fraud. Derek was ordered to return all assets and pay restitution for the misappropriated funds. Additionally, he faced criminal charges for financial exploitation of an elderly person and forgery. The court finds that Derek Morrison systematically exploited his dying father, Judge Williams said. His actions constitute elder abuse and fraud. I'm referring this case to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. Derek's face went white. His lawyer immediately requested an appeal, but the evidence was overwhelming. Outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed us. Cameron, how do you feel about your brother facing criminal charges? One asked. I feel like justice was served. My father deserved better than to be manipulated in his final days. Will you ever reconcile with your brother? I didn't hesitate. No, what he did was unforgivable. Some actions have consequences that can't be undone. Jessica took my hand. We're focused on honoring Cameron's father properly now. That's what matters. A week later, Derek showed up at my house. Jessica saw him through the window. Cameron, Derek's here. I stepped outside. Derek looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes. What do you want, Derek? I need help. The criminal charges. I'm looking at real jail time, and I have to pay back the money, but I don't have it. I spent it all. That's not my problem. You're my brother. You can't just abandon me. Like you abandoned Dad, like you abandoned me. I made a mistake. I said I'm sorry. What more do you want? I want you to face the consequences of your actions. You stole from a dying man. You forged legal documents. You tried to destroy me financially. Sorry doesn't fix that. So what? You're just going to let me go to prison? You're sending yourself to prison. I'm just making sure Dad's last wishes, his real wishes, are honored. This is revenge, Cameron, pure revenge. No, Derek, this is justice. There's a difference. I crossed my arms. You had a choice every step of the way. You chose to exploit Dad when he was vulnerable. You chose to forge documents. You chose to steal. I was desperate. So that makes it okay? Desperation doesn't justify what you did. Dad taught us better than that. Dad's dead. He doesn't care anymore. I care. And apparently the law cares too. Please, Cameron, I'm begging you, drop the charges. I'll disappear. You'll never see me again. It's out of my hands now. The district attorney is prosecuting. This isn't about what I want anymore. Yes, it is. You could talk to them. You could make this go away. Why would I do that? So you can hurt someone else? So you can learn that actions don't have consequences? Derek's voice cracked. I'm scared, Cameron. I'm really scared. You should be. Maybe that fear will teach you something that Dad's love never could. He stood there for a long moment, then turned and walked away. I never saw him again. Derek was sentenced to 3 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution. The business was returned to me, and I expanded it in Dad's honor. Every decision I make, I think about what he would have wanted, not the confused, medicated version Derek exploited, but the strong, clear-minded father who taught me integrity. Sometimes family will betray you in ways you never imagined. The question is, do you let them get away with it, or do you stand up for what's right? If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and subscribe for more real-life revenge tales. Have you ever dealt with family betrayal? Share your story in the comments below.